Okay, boys and girls, we're going to create a new project today, and we're going to use some art words that we've been talking about. So last project we talked about warm and cool colors and contrasting colors. So we learned that warm colors and light colors contrast cool colors and dark colors. So that means these colors are opposite from these colors so that they stand out and they look good next to each other. We practiced this in our last project, layering on top two colors that will contrast each other, warm and cool colors or light and dark colors. We also talked about symmetry, how a pattern can be the same on both sides, and that would be symmetrical. So we're going to choose some contrasting colors and symmetry today to make something a little bit different. This is what I call a skate deck. So a skate deck is kind of like the art that goes on the bottom of a skateboard. Maybe some of you have seen this before. Lots of artists design different types of skate decks. So we're going to use our color and our symmetry knowledge that we learned about to create one of these. So you're going to start with 4 different colors of paper. So you're going to be layering these colors on top of each other. I want you to pick 4 colors that will contrast each other. For example, if blue is my first layer, and I'm going to layer a color on top of blue, I'm going to pick a light or a warm color. So I think I'll pick green as my second layer. So what I can do is I can just take a pencil and I can mark my layers so that I know which layer comes next. So I think I'm just going to take my pencil and say blue is number 1, green is number 2, lime green is number 2. So since lime green is such a light, bright color, I need a darker or a cool color to layer on top of that. So I'm going to pick this dark red. So that will be my layer number 3. And then finally, one more color. I'm going to pick a color that will stand out against this dark red, and I'll pick this bright yellow. So that would be my 4th layer. So I'm going to start with my first layer, which is the blue. And I'm not going to do anything to this blue. This is just going to be my background. This is where I'm going to glue my other patterns on top. So now I'll get my second layer, and here's where we're going to start to cut some symmetrical patterns. So same as last time when we were practicing cutting these symmetrical patterns, we're going to fold our paper not as a triangle, but just as a rectangle. So I'm just going to fold it long ways, kind of like a hot dog. Okay, now my job is to cut out a lot of different types of shapes from each of the 4 sides of the rectangle. So I told you last time that you could take your pencil and draw some shapes, or you could just take your scissors and just start to cut out these random shapes. So when you're cutting out these shapes, I want to make sure that you have big shapes and that your shapes are cut out from all 4 sides. This is really important. So I'm going to cut some triangles. I'll start to cut some wavy lines and curvy shapes. And I'll switch to this side over here. So look how big I'm making sure my shapes are. I'm not making them really teeny tiny. I want to cut out some big shapes from each side here. Okay, and every time I cut out a shape, I have to make sure it creates a space. So I'm not just cutting a line like this. I have to actually cut out a shape. Okay, so I've gone on this side and on the 2 ends. Now I'm going to go back on this folded side and cut out some shapes. Now it's really important that I don't cut all the way through because that will cut my pattern in half. I just want to cut on this fold and look at the space that I have left and just start to cut out some shapes. So most of my paper here is going to be cut out scraps. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. I've got lots of shapes cut out on all 4 sides. So I'm going to unravel my pattern now, and I have this really neat symmetrical pattern. So I'm going to take my glue bottle now, and I'm going to take some glue and just put a few dots on my pattern. So not a lot. I don't want to see big globs of glue, just a couple dots all over to get each of the little ends glued down. And then once I have that, I'm just going to flip it and glue it onto my background. Okay, so that's my first layer. I have this nice symmetrical pattern, lime green standing out against the blue. So I'm going to repeat this for my next 2 layers. So I know that now I have to start with this dark red layer to layer on top of this lime green. So I will do the same thing. Fold this as a rectangle and start to cut out some new shapes. Okay, so I've cut out shapes from one side. Now let's open it up and see. I haven't cut out shapes from this side yet. If I like this, I can keep that, or if I want to go back and fold it up again and cut out more shapes, I can do that. So I think this is pretty interesting, but I think I'm going to go back on this side and just cut out a few more small shapes. Just a few to give my pattern a little bit of a more interesting design. Okay, so I've got this next layer. I'm going to open it up, and I think it looks pretty good. So now I'm going to do the same thing, put a little bit of glue just on a few spots on the corners and the edges, flip it, and glue my next pattern down here. Okay, I'm going to do the last thing for my last yellow layer. So let's just pretend that I folded my yellow layer and I glued it on top, and it's going to look something kind of like this. My patterns are layered on top, contrasting colors, and symmetry. So the last thing I'm going to do to make this look more like a skate deck, if you have any pieces hanging off the sides, you can just flip it over and look at those and trim those. But also we need to cut the edges and curve the edges. So I'm just going to take my scissor and make some curvy lines on each of the corners. So I'm just kind of cutting the corners off, but I'm making this a curved edge. So it looks like kind of a skateboard. And once I've done that on the last edge there, I am finished. Unless I want to cut out those little edges there. So there's my awesome skate deck with my contrasting colors and symmetrical patterns.